I've told you before, this is not a parking lot. You need to move this immediately.
Some mornings feel like any other, until suddenly they don't. That day began as one of my favorite kinds of mornings. Quiet, sunny, and perfect for rolling my Harley Davidson out of the garage. The deep, thunderous rumble of the engine was like music to my ears, a sound that had defined so much of my life. This wasn't just a machine to me, it was a legacy. My father had bought it when I was still a kid, and I had grown up listening to that engine like others might listen to bedtime stories. He had passed it down to me after he was gone, and every time I ran a cloth across the chrome I felt like I was honoring him. But not everyone shared that sentiment, least of all Karen, the self-proclaimed queen of our HOA. For months, she had complained that my Harley was too loud, too flashy, and not appropriate for the community. Every excuse under the sun was thrown at me, as if my bike's existence was a personal attack on her carefully manicured world. She had sent letters with HOA letterhead, left notes taped to my door, and even made it a point to shout across the cul-de-sac every time I came home. Still nothing compared to what happened that morning. I was kneeling by the bike, tightening a bolt on the exhaust, when I heard footsteps approaching. Looking up, I saw Karen's teenage son swaggering over, a smug grin plastered on his face. He was tall for his age, but carried himself with the arrogance of someone who had never been told no. He jabbed a finger at my Harley and said, "Mum says this belongs to us now. Either hand it over or the cops are going to deal with you." At first I thought I misheard him. I actually laughed, waiting for the punchline, but he didn't crack a smile. He was dead serious. My amusement faded into disbelief, then anger. "What did you just say?" I asked, standing up slowly, wiping grease from my hands. Before he could answer, Karen herself came marching across the street like a general on parade. She wore oversized sunglasses, her phone clutched in one hand like a weapon. "You heard him," she barked. "That motorcycle violates HOA standards. It's loud, ugly, and a nuisance to the entire neighborhood. Consider this property reassigned. My son deserves it more than you. He'll treat it properly." For a second, I was too stunned to respond. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "You can't just take someone's property," I said firmly. "That's not how this works. This bike is mine, legally, lawfully, and personally. End of discussion." Karen sneered. "Everything in this neighborhood falls under HOA jurisdiction. You agreed to the rules when you bought this house, and the rules say—" I cut her off. "Show me the rule that says you can confiscate someone's personal property and give it to your kid." She faltered for a moment, then puffed herself up again. "The board will back me up. Don't test me. If you don't hand it over, I'll call the police." I took a deep breath, fighting to keep my cool. The Harley wasn't just a motorcycle. It was the memory of my father. The rides we took down back roads in the summer, the lessons I learned as I sat behind him on the seat. It was my anchor, my therapy, and my joy. To hear Karen talk about it like it was a lawn ornament to be redistributed made my blood boil. I told her flat out, "Karen, get off my property, now." Her lips curled into a smug smile. She raised her phone, dialed a number, and said loud enough for me to hear, "Yes, officer, I need you to come down here. A man is violating HOA laws, and he's harassing me. Yes, he has an illegal motorcycle. On his property." Then she hung up and looked at me with pure satisfaction. "You're finished," I couldn't help but smirk. Because what she didn't know was that later that very day, I was scheduled to brief the state attorney himself on a series of HOA abuse cases. This was literally my field of work: property rights, HOA overreach, and unlawful harassment. If Karen thought she was about to win, she had no idea just how badly she was out of her league. But I let her enjoy her illusion a little longer. 20 minutes later, the flashing lights of 2 squad cars filled the street. Neighbors peeked out of windows, some even coming outside to stand on porches. Karen strutted toward the officers like she had summoned angels from the heavens. She pointed at me with dramatic flair. "That's him. He's harassing me, breaking HOA laws, and storing an illegal motorcycle. Confiscate it. My son is the rightful owner now." The officers blinked, clearly caught off guard by her demands. One of them turned to me and asked politely for documentation. Without hesitation, I handed over the title in my name, my father's, original purchase documents, and my insurance. My paperwork was clean as a whistle. Karen's son tried to step forward and argue, But one officer stopped him with a hand on the chest. "Ma'am," the officer said firmly, "there is no legal basis for this claim. This motorcycle belongs to him. HOA rules do not override state law." Karen's face went crimson. "Do you know who I am?" she shrieked. "I run this community. You're making a huge mistake." I couldn't resist. I crossed my arms, leaned against my Harley, and said calmly, "Officers, thank you for your time. I'll be sure to bring this incident up at my meeting with the state attorney this afternoon. He'll want to know that police resources were wasted on false claims and that an HOA president tried to confiscate private property." The shift was immediate. The officers stiffened slightly, exchanged glances, and one of them nodded. They knew the state attorney. Everyone in law enforcement did. Suddenly, this wasn't just another petty neighborhood spat. This was a potential reportable offense that could echo in the higher offices of justice. Karen paled. For the first time, I saw hesitation in her eyes. But she couldn't back down. Her pride wouldn't let her. She screamed about corruption and favoritism, accusing the officers of being on my side. The officers, clearly done with the circus, gave her a final warning about making false reports before stepping back into their vehicles. As they pulled away, Karen turned on me with venom. "This isn't over. You'll regret this," but I just smiled, swung a leg over my Harley, and let the engine roar to life. The sound echoed off the houses, a powerful reminder that not only was the bike still mine, so was my freedom. What Karen didn't realize was that she had just written her own downfall. By the end of the day, her name would be sitting on the desk of the state attorney, not as a respected leader of the HOA, but as a perfect example of everything wrong with unchecked HOA power. And soon the whole neighborhood would know exactly how little power Karen really had. By the time the sun was beginning its slow descent across the horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, I was already on my way downtown for my scheduled meeting with the state attorney. The events of the morning, the attempted theft of my Harley, the fake HOA law, the cops arriving only to leave Karen red-faced and sputtering, were still buzzing in my mind. For most people, it would have been just another ridiculous encounter with a power-drunk HOA president, but for me it was ammunition. I had been preparing my case files for weeks. My work involved investigating HOA abuse, collecting testimonies, and presenting cases where homeowners were being pushed to their breaking points by corrupt boards. I had binders full of documented complaints, contracts, violations of property, rights and outright fraud. And now, thanks to Karen's arrogance, I had a real-time example of an HOA president trying to confiscate private property with no legal basis. When I arrived at the state attorney's office, I could feel the weight of the day lifting a little. The Harley was parked safely outside, gleaming under the evening light, and I walked into the tall glass building with a sense of purpose. Inside, the waiting area was quiet, only a few people scattered in the plush chairs. My name was called, and I was led back to a large conference room. The state attorney himself, a sharp, composed man with years of experience written across his face, was already there, reviewing documents spread out across the table. "Good to see you again," he said, shaking my hand firmly. "I hear you've brought some new material." "You could say that," I replied, sliding a fresh folder across the table. Inside were the notes from that morning's debacle, the timeline, the attempted confiscation of my Harley, and the police report confirming the false call Karen had made. He leaned back in his chair, scanning the first few pages, and then he gave me a look that was equal parts disbelief and irritation. "She actually tried to take your motorcycle." "Not just take it," I said, my tone steady but edged with frustration. "She tried to assign it to her son, as if property rights don't exist. Then she called the cops and wasted their time trying to frame me as the problem. If this isn't abuse of authority, I don't know what is." The state attorney exhaled slowly, tapping a pen against the folder. "This lines up with what we've been seeing. HOA boards that act like private kingdoms. Presidents who think they can override state law because they hide behind covenants and bylaws. It's getting out of hand." I nodded. "And the worst part? Homeowners are scared. They don't know their rights, so they give in. They pay bogus fines. They let the harassment continue because they don't think they have the power to fight back." Karen picked the wrong person this time, but how many people before me just folded? He stayed quiet for a moment, thinking. I could see the weight of his responsibility pressing down. He wasn't just a lawyer, he was the state attorney. Every decision he made rippled through the system. Finally, he leaned forward. I want her name, I want the entire HOA board's names, and I want every piece of evidence you have. Letters, emails, fake fines, police reports. If she's abusing her power this blatantly, I guarantee you she's not doing it alone. I slid another binder across the table, already prepared. For the next hour we went page by page, case by case. Neighbors who had been fined for the color of their curtains. Families who had been threatened with foreclosure over weeds in their lawns. Seniors who were told they couldn't park their RVs on their own property. Each example added fuel to the fire. And then, at the end, the crown jewel. My own encounter, complete with the fact that 2 officers had confirmed on record that Karen tried to misuse police resources. The state attorney closed the binder and looked at me with the kind of seriousness that told me everything I needed to know. This isn't just a civil issue anymore. This is criminal abuse of authority, false reporting, potential fraud. We're moving forward with this. Hearing those words was like a weight off my shoulders. For months, it had felt like screaming into the void, trying to get someone in authority to take these abuses seriously. And now, because Karen had overstepped so arrogantly, it was all coming to a head. But he wasn't done. He pushed back his chair, stood, and walked to the window, looking out at the city lights flickering on. You know what the irony is? He said quietly. People like her think they're untouchable because they hide behind a title, HOA president, board chair, whatever. But when the law gets involved, that title won't save them, it'll bury them. I couldn't help but smile grimly. She thought she could take my Harley. Instead, she handed us the case we needed. He turned back. To me, his expression fierce with resolve. Exactly. And when this goes public, it's going to send a message to every HOA in this state. They are not above the law. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. Formal investigations were launched, subpoenas were issued, the HOA's financial records were requested. Karen, who once strutted around the neighborhood with her head high, now scurried from her car to her front door, avoiding eye contact. Neighbors whispered, rumors spread, and for the first time people felt like they might actually have a chance to stand up against her tyranny. And then came the day of the hearing. The courtroom was packed. Homeowners who had been wronged filled the benches. Reporters lined the back. And Karen sat at the defense table looking nothing like the untouchable queen she once pretended to be. Her lawyer shuffled nervously through papers while she glared at me across the room with daggers in her eyes. The state attorney walked in, files in hand, and when he spoke, the room fell silent. He laid out the case with precision, every false fine, every harassing letter, every abuse of power. Then, with a pause for impact, he brought up the police report from the morning she tried to steal my Harley. This, he said firmly, holding up the document, is not a misunderstanding. This is deliberate abuse of authority. This is someone who believes they are above the law, and in this